Welcome to the Non-Superheroes Just Dads podcast. No, we can't fly. No, we can't shoot lasers or pick up giant buildings. But what we can do is help set the foundations for our families, be presents for our kids, and combat generational cycles. On this podcast, we dive into everything dad-related, from the struggles we deal with as fathers to what our favorite thing, the barbecue, is. Hello, I'm Sean Laurie. I hope you guys are having an amazing, blessed day today. Before we start, guys, make sure you like, subscribe, share, tell a friend. You guys know I always appreciate the input, the conversations. Matter of fact, as we get ready to dive into this topic actually came from one of my friends, just having some dialogue, and he was like, man, I think this is something you should be talking about. And it ties into how a lot of us grew up, right, in the 90s, but also like with gentle parenting, right? So this one might hit a little different for some of you guys, but because we are, about to talk about, growing up in the 90s, right? I just wanted to talk about how it shaped us as men, as fathers, and more importantly, how we raise our kids today in a completely different world than the world we grew up. Because let's be honest, we grew up way different than our kids today, right? For us, it was less supervision, more consequences for sure, and somewhat more accountability. So the question is, did we grow up in the better era, I guess, right? That's what people like to say, or did we grow up where it was a little bit tougher, a little bit harder, and so that's something I wanted to kind of dive into, because I don't know, I've like, yes, there was some good things about how we grew up, but there was also some negatives as well, right? I hear this often, and it's one of those things like, are we overreacting to how we grew up, or how we overreacted as parents today? Because growing up in the 90s, there were certain things that were just understood. When our parents said something, that was it. Like, there was no talking back. There was no, going to voice your opinion on it. Like, that was it. Many times, there was no video games like that. Or if there was a video game, you be on a video game too long, go outside, go ride a bike, go run, go do something, right? And for me, I still implement some of those things to this day when it comes to that. Like, I have my kids go outside, run around, play, things like that. But we'll dive into that in a little bit. But again, it was just different, or when the coaches got on you, you just listened. Right? There was no, hey, you know what, I didn't like how the coach talked to me, so I'm going to go to this team, or I'm going to go to that team, or, you know what, my dad's going to start his own team, my mom's going to start her own team, or whatever, right? It wasn't, that wasn't a thing. When you messed up, there were just going to be consequences, and that was it. There was no debating, right? No back and forth. I remember for me and my mom, I wouldn't even think about trying to negotiate anything. It was like, all right, that sucks, but I just got to deal with it, and we didn't like it, right? Like, you guys remember going through that. Like, we didn't like that at all, but in the same time, like, it also helped build something in us, It helped us to build that respect, that toughness for sure, right? That accountability, and being able to have that toughness, not just mentally but physically. We had to figure things out. We really had no other choice. We had no other choice but to figure things out. When different shows was coming on or something like that, hey, go upstairs, go in your room, don't ask no questions. And that was pretty much it. Nobody was coming to save us every time something went wrong. So, hey, man, like, toughen up. It is what it is. Or shoot, I know there was times for me, I got in trouble for things that had nothing to do with me, right? And I'm like, wait, how am I getting in trouble for this, for something my sibling did, right? But again, that was just the era that we grew up in. But let's be honest, when it comes to that, yes, we have that mental toughness and things, but it's not like everything about the way we grow was perfect, because it wasn't. Some of us didn't get that emotional support we needed. Some of us were told to be quiet instead of being heard. Now too, right, a lot of people are coming out now where ADHD or maybe being on the spectrum or things like that. I remember speaking with this doctor one time, and the doctor was just saying like a lot of adults now are on the spectrum and don't realize it, right? Because back then when we were doing certain things or whatever the case is, it was one of those things where it was like, knock it off. Why you keep doing that? Why aren't you listening? Or, you know, you're just crying to cry. Like there was no, you know, you're really hurting. Maybe you should talk to someone. You know, you're doing this, but you're not doing this on purpose. Let's go get professional help, you know. And because especially in the black community, I'm sure in a lot of the minority communities, but it's one of those things where it was looked frowned upon. Like, oh, no, you're not going to go speak to no therapist, or you're not going to go, you know, no doctor's going to tell me you have ADHD, or, you know, you're on the spectrum, or, you know, oh, wait, you're trying to say my child is, you know, slow or this, right? All these negative things that we attach to it. Obviously now we know that's not the case, but it used to be these negative labels that we put on, right? So that's one aspect. And then, you know, discipline is one thing, but there's many times where it would maybe cross the line, you know, and so it goes from respecting your parents to being fearful, to not be able to have that communication with them because of that, right? Because of a lot what we do as parents today, I feel like is a response of what we went through, right? So now let's fast forward into the gentle parenting, right? So, you know, you hear that a lot now, like, hey, gentle parenting, hey, no, you know what, I never hit my kid, I never, you know, again, there's nothing wrong if that's the lane you choose, like, hey, I don't spank my kids, I don't believe in that, that's perfectly fine, however you want to do it, right? Because there is some good things in the gentle parenting. You know, I feel like parents are more aware, you know, definitely more present. Like many fathers now are putting so much more of an effort to be involved, which is a beautiful thing, you know, and more willing to communicate, you know, in aspects. Like I know for me, you know, I make sure I try to communicate with my kids, even though, you know, there's times when they drive me crazy. There's times when I'm like, what are you talking about? But I try to make sure I listen to whatever they have going on, you know, and that's a beautiful thing. And I think this era that we're in as parents, we're breaking so many generational cycles. You know, we're trying to do better. We're trying to do the work. We're constantly researching. We're constantly, you know, now, right, ironically, it was frowned upon to speak to a therapist, but now we're more willing to speak to a therapist. Now we're even open about like, yeah, man, I was dealing with this, so, you know, I spoke with someone about it and they helped me, or, right, this is something I battled with, but now I'm in a better place, right? So, like I said, there's a lot of beautiful things when it comes to gentle parenting. And I think it's also, you know, it's also been able to open up dialogue as far as how our kids feel when we never got to voice how we feel, you know. But somehow gentle parenting has also turned into many ways like a passive parenting in a sense, right? And this is like, if I'm being honest, right? Again, some of y'all are not gonna probably like this, but you know, many of us as parents went through trauma growing up, right? We went through so many different negative things that wasn't right, that probably could have been considered abuse, or, you know, could have easily had you taken away from your parents if you reported it, right, because of certain things like that. So, but instead of correcting those things, we are now trying to avoid it altogether. You know, instead of disciplining our kids, it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna let that go. I'm gonna let this slide, right? Instead of having structure, which we had a lot of, many of us, right? It's like, I don't want to be too hard on them, because what if they get mad at me, right? Because now we're in this era where a lot of parents want to be their child's best friend, right? They're more so, hey, you know what? I want to be my son's best friend instead of being his dad. You know, I want to be, and there's nothing wrong being that friend, but at the same time, when it's time to be dad, you gotta be dad. You gotta make those tough decisions, right? And so, let's be honest, our kids never want to hear no. If it's up to them, they're always going to hear yes. No, shoot, as adults, we don't want to hear no. So our kids definitely don't want to hear the word no. But when we're constantly giving in to our kids, it's like, at a certain point, now there's no boundaries. Now you're upset because they don't have respect for you. I'll be hearing kids a lot of times in the store just talking crazy to their moms or even their dads. I'm looking like, dang, like I could never do that, right? I talk crazy like that, I'm getting hit upside my head, right? like that's not happening at all. But now we're in this era where, if you just yell at your kids now, they're having a mental breakdown and wanting to run away and think you hate them and think you're just the worst parent ever. You're like, no, I'm yelling at you because you know what, you stole something, right? You shouldn't have stole something, and so I'm yelling at you. And now in today's era, it's like the kid will be like, well, if you just bought it for me, I wouldn't have stole it. Right? And then we're questioning ourselves like, man, maybe if I did buy this, maybe they wouldn't have stolen it. Instead of like, no, hey, what you did wasn't right. And because of that, our kids struggle with accountability, right? And it's funny though, because our kids aren't going to know any better. They're going to be upset because at the end of the day, they're going to do whatever they feel like is fun or whatever they think is cool. And you make those tough decisions, they get upset with you. But then when they get older, they're like, dang, I wish you was maybe a little bit harder on me. Dang, I wish you gave me responsibility. Dang, I wish I knew how it was to be able to pay rent, to be able to pay a bill, to be able to handle adversity that happens in the real world. Because in the real world, they don't care about that. In the real world, you're not going to be able to get cuddled and be able to get, the things you want just because that's what you want. No, you're going to have to work for everything you get. And that's just the reality of it. So when we're constantly giving them different things, they don't know what accountability is. Now, not only the accountability helps them to be able to understand, hey, this is where I messed up and things like that, but then they can also understand how to hold others accountable, right? Now they're struggling in not just with themselves, but they might be struggling in relationships. Now they're in relationships they shouldn't be in because they don't even know how to hold others accountable, right? So it's like a domino effect. And that doesn't help them. It hurts them when we're so busy trying to be involved. Now your son is 26 years old, never had a steady job, don't have his own place, still living with you, can't seem to get a car, can't seem to even do the most simplest things by themselves, right? They can't even get a bus pass, right? They don't know how to do anything without your permission. And that actually hurts them because the real world is not gentle at all. The real world will give them the raw truth regardless if they like it or not. So, for us, where do we land as fathers, right? Because it's not about going back to how things was, because we can't, especially with technology, right? We can't go back to how things was. And that's also another thing, man, real quick, is like technology isn't a bad thing, right? I know people freak out when it comes to AI. People freak out with different technology. But technology isn't a bad thing. It's the people that do bad things with technology, right? It's just like with anything. A gun itself can't hurt people, but people shooting the gun can hurt people, right? Now, I know I'm not trying to get into that whole debate, but I know, like, right, people say, well, hey, don't even have a gun in the house, all that stuff. Okay, that's a whole nother thing. But I have that same thing when it comes to technology with certain things. For example, my younger kids, my oldest do, but my youngest kids don't have a phone, right? They're on their tablets at times, but I try to do my best to monitor what they're on their tablets, right? And they know there's something they'll tell me, right? My daughter will tell me if my youngest son is watching something or seeing something he shouldn't be seeing. He's 7 years old, so I don't want to see him, or I don't want him watching something where somebody's getting, I don't know, chopped up or something crazy like that, right? So, like, I'm very conscious of, hey, you can be on this tablet or you can be whatever it is, but it's only from this time to this time. And they know, because I set that standard, that when I tell them, hey, it's time to get off, every now and then, of course, they're kids, they're going to complain. But when I tell them to get off, they get off for the most part. It's not going to be, oh, dang, I'm crying, I'm upset. Well, my youngest will be upset. He won't cry, but he'll be mad about it. And then he'll just ask, like, okay, can I watch whatever show he wants to watch, right? But I just wanted to point that out, because a lot of times I feel like we blame technology where at the end of the day it comes to us, right? because as parents, as fathers, we're tired. We had a long day. I get it. Like, we have a lot going on. So it's easy at times to say, just go on that tablet or go on YouTube, whatever, and do that. But when we constantly do that, all of a sudden they're learning things that we might not want them to learn right away. Or they're learning things, but it's not being put in the proper context. So now it is hurting the foundation we're building for our kids, because they're thinking, well, this is how I'm supposed to act. If my youngest daughter is watching Cardi B, right, and I don't see, I'm just using her example, so no shade to any Cardi B fans, I guess, right? But if she's listening to Cardi B and seeing those videos, why when my daughter maybe, and I'm not having these conversations with her, I have no clue what she's looking at or watching, and she's seeing that, then she sees it outside with people at school or neighbors or whatever, she's thinking, man, this is how I'm supposed to operate. I'm supposed to be twerking or doing this or wearing this type of stuff, because at the end of the day, this is how I'm going to get attention, because boys only like this, right? And I'm not having those conversations with her, or I try to have those conversations with her, but it's too late because I let that technology teach her everything that I didn't want her to learn, or teaching her things that's not in the proper context. So I say all that just to emphasize that technology isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's how we use it. And when we use it to be a heavy influence in our parenting, in my opinion, that's when we get in trouble. Or that's when it hurts our kids, I should say. Right? So, but yeah, it's so for me, it's just about balance. You know, our kids, honestly, I feel like they need it and they love structure, right? When they know what is expected every time, that's when they really flourish. At least for my kids. I can't speak for everyone else. But when there's certain structure, now will they be upset about the structure at times? Yes, but they will still flourish, right? And they'll be to ask certain questions that you can help them with, because they're going to know, okay, this is the standard, but this has changed right here. So let me have this conversation, right? And that's why I said the balance, because it's not like the 90s where you couldn't even have a conversation, right? It's like, hey, let me have a conversation about X, Y, and Z. They need grace, but they also need accountability. So it's okay, hey, I'm going to let this slide, but you also got to help them have accountability, because if not, that's where they get in trouble, because like I said, it's going to be a trickle-down effect. So that's what you definitely want for our kids, right? Is to have that accountability, and they need our voice, right? They need our voice, but we got to also listen to theirs, you know. But while listening to theirs, make sure that there's a boundary, you know. Make sure that they're feeling heard, but make sure you have those boundaries. Hey, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I don't need you cussing at me, right? I hear what you're saying, but you don't need to be yelling at me. Hey, I hear what you're saying, but you don't need to be throwing things or hitting the wall or whatever the case is. You know, we're not here to be feared as fathers, but we are here to be respected, you know, and to love our kids the best way we can. You know, I just look at it like we have to lead and not focus on the friendship aspect, which I feel like at times gets very tricky. You know, I see all the time though with me coaching. You know, the kids thrive when they're structured. And when I'm setting certain expectations and correct them, but also hold them accountable, that's when the kids flourish. And at times, is it frustrating? Yes. Because, for example, if I have to go over the same thing over and over again, that is frustrating. Instead of getting so overwhelmed and frustrated, okay, you know what? Let me trim it down. I'm going to trim it all the way down. Let's start to the basics. And when I do that, the kids get frustrated when I coach. They'll in practice, right? They'll get frustrated because we're doing the same thing over and over and over again. But it's like, hey, we have to focus on the details, and I have to show you this is how I expect it to be done. And when it's not done, right? Because if I break it down, if I trim all the fat and I break it down what I want them to run or whatever play or whatever we're into, whatever set we're in, if I break it down to the very minimal, right? And they're still struggling, and we went over it, and they're still struggling, or they get it, but then they're not doing what I asked them. Now I'm going to hold them accountable. Hey, you know what? You're going to have to sit down for a second, because I told you this is what I expect, and we went over this. You said you got it, you said you understood it, and yet it's still being the same issue over and over again. And are they going to like it? No, but that's okay. Guess what? Sometimes the parents aren't going to like it either, right? Like, they're not going to like it if I'm like, hey, you know what? I told little Johnny 7 times that, hey, stay right here in this zone, right? We're doing a 2-3 zone. This side is yours. He keeps going all the way on the other side, right? And we went over it 5 times, but that's where the accountability comes in, you know. That's just something I just want to share because it goes in all aspects, man. But you know what I feel like what we can do, man, as fathers is just a few things, man. Like I said, set the foundation, but set clear expectations for your house, whatever your house is. However you'll structure your dynamic is, you set that structure. Because I could never tell another, and I would never tell another man how to set the foundation for his home. That's however you set it. But that's one of the things you definitely can do is just set that foundation, that expectation. If the expectation is, yeah, dad lets me go on the tablet all day and all night, that's your prerogative, right? Just understand what could come with it, though, right? But that's your prerogative if that's what you want to do. But just set those expectations, and you know, don't just say it. Make sure you enforce whatever that is. And then follow through consequences. Consequences doesn't have to mean you got to whoop them, right? You could take stuff away. You can, I make my son do different workouts that he hates doing at times, right? So there's different ways that you can still get your point across and not whoop them if that's not the lane that you choose, right? But, you know, because if there's no follow through, kids won't learn, honestly. They'll learn much quicker when they know, okay, this is the consequences that's going to happen, and my dad's going to follow through. Not, hey, I'm going to take that game away, and you never take the game away, right? Or, hey, you can't watch TV, but then an hour later you let them watch TV, you know, because you got to let kids get a little uncomfortable sometimes, and that's okay. Honestly, that's where growth happens. We know that, right? The times that we have grown the most in our lives is when we was uncomfortable. Could have been a job, could have been in a relationship, right? Could have been our own personal journey. But whatever it was, we was uncomfortable on some things, and that's where you saw the growth happens. And then obviously talking to our kids. Like talking but not necessarily not negotiating, just more so talking and listening. You know, and I feel like, man, we do those things, man, at the end of the day, you know, we're not here to repeat the past, you know, but we're also not here to erase the lessons that made us, right? And who made us who we are. So the goal is balance, man, and just being able to help our kids grow strong and not just physically but mentally, and be to just help make them strong leaders at the end of the day, man. That's, at least in my opinion, that's something that I feel like, you know, is key, man. So I just wanted to dive into that because so many times I do hear that, like, man, you know, in the 90s it was this way. And yes, those was good times in certain aspect. There was also things that could have been better. And so let's blend the two, right? Let's blend the two and grow from that. Let's put some of the lessons we learned in the 90s, but let's put the lessons that we learned in today's day, right? And be able to implement those things and just see how amazing it is. Because, again, at the end of the day, I think our kids love structure and need it. It's something that they need. We need it as people, because if we don't have structure, we're lost. So we're lost without structure. What do you think happens with our kids? But yeah, man, I just wanted to share that with you guys, man. And again, you know, like always, you don't have to be perfect, but you always have to be present. I'll see you guys on the next one.